Greetings and bienvenue, Midnight Crew. Thank you for returning to this broadcast. And welcome to new viewers joining us for the first time. If you like a video, then feel free to subscribe.
This event took place approximately 19 years ago, around 1998. A friend and I were on our way back to my place at about 2 or 2:30 a.m. one night coming from Exton, Pennsylvania. We stopped at the Turkey Hill on Route 323 east of the town of Honeybrook to grab something to drink. I pulled into a parking space on the left side of the store in front of the window. I got out of the car, my friend remained in the car. Passing the window, I noticed a man leaning down on the windowsill inside. He was wearing a wide-brimmed black hat and had his head down so I couldn't see his face, just the hat. Entering the store, I noticed the male clerk behind the counter with his back to me. I retrieved the drinks I went in for and proceeded to the counter. As I did, I observed the man leaning down in the sill, head still down, wearing all black and a black trench coat. Paying for my items, I noticed the clerk acted as if the man wasn't even there, but slightly spooked at the same time, being very short with words and very precise in his actions. Leaving the store, I intended to relay this to my friend waiting in my car. As I got back and she was looking at the man leaning down in the sill and asked if I saw this guy. I said yes and had told her a little about being inside the store as I put the car in reverse to leave. At that point, the man began to raise his head. He faced directly out at us, but oddly, as my friend yelled, he had no face. It was like it was blurred out, like they do on TV. Needless to say, we were both freaked out a little and I tore off out of the lot and headed east toward my home, which was only a quarter mile or so from the store. My friend and I were silent at this point as I pulled into the entrance of my mobile home park. I stopped the car there and told my friend we were going back as I suspected the clerk may be getting robbed by the man in the window. We headed out of the entrance and went back to the store. I decided to make a right on a back road across from the store, by a local store, deli, and told my friend to look over inside the store to see what she could. The man was no longer crouching in the sill, but couldn't be seen inside anywhere either. I proceeded a short distance down this road to turn around when we witnessed a female, wearing all black, walking towards us in the middle of the opposite lane. After passing her, I immediately turned around to head back toward the store and asked the female if she needed help. Reaching the stop sign at the intersection, we noticed she was gone. We then turned our attention back to the store across the street and decided to go right, heading west on 322, slowly past the store when we noticed the man was now outside, crouching by the payphone, head down, to the right of the store, and a blacked-out Lincoln Continental or town car parked to his left we hadn't noticed before. The clerk was inside standing behind the counter at this point, staring straight out the windows and perfectly still. I turned around a short distance down at the next mobile home park with the small diner in front and proceeded east again. This time we pulled back into the parking lot, the man, the car, and the clerk still in the same positions as previous. The man began raising his head again, and again I tore off out of the lot, going east on 322 toward my home. About 300 feet from leaving the lot, I had to swerve to miss another man, wearing all black, walking towards us, in the center of our lane, going west towards the store. Both mine and my friend's hearts were pounding at this point, and again I had to turn around and go back wondering what the hell was going on. As we returned back to the store and pulled into the lot, we noticed that the walking man was gone, the crouching man with no face was gone, and the car was gone, and the male clerk from inside was now a female clerk moving around doing work inside the store. At no time did we witness any other patrons to the store, nor anyone else inside the store, nor any other vehicles in the lot during any of this. After finally returning home and talking for a bit, my friend calmed down enough to drive herself home. Passing the store after leaving, the same female clerk was still the only person there. My friend's car subsequently broke down on her a short distance away, transmission blew. She did make it home safe that night though. I frequented that same store and days later saw that same male clerk working there, where I noticed his demeanor to be totally different than that night. Neither of us at the time thought we had witnessed men in black activity. It wasn't until years later, while researching stories of men in black encounters, that it hit me. We have both seen unidentified craft periodically throughout our lives, and she and her mother have witnessed a being that didn't seem of this earth. We still keep in contact to this day. Because of a landed unidentified craft my mother witnessed in the late 1970s when I was about 8 or 9, I've researched events involving UFOs throughout my life and attempt to investigate sightings now.
My abduction experience was on the 22nd of October 1991 at approximately 7:45 p.m. local time. The location was Red Rock, a small village surrounded by fields, 3 miles from Wigan town centre, and a couple of miles from the start of moors near an area called Winter Hill, Lancashire. As for the men in black, well, that is more difficult. for some reason, I did not make a note of the date. I cannot even remember the year. In fact, since my abduction, it's as if I am not supposed to remember. I believe it may have been 1993. The contact with the men in black I mentioned to you was not the first, but I feel it was the most important. I received a phone call out of the blue from a person purporting to be a student from a nearby university. He said that he had heard a lot about me and my experiences in ufology. He and a friend of his were very interested in my story and would like to meet me. He sounded genuine, so I said yes. For whatever reasons, they wanted to meet me at Wigan Northwestern Railway Station, an intercity link. All was duly organized, and a friend and I, there is no way I was meeting them on my own, waited for their train to arrive. When the southbound unit arrived, only 5 people alighted, 3 females and 2 big chaps. When my friend and I saw the blokes, we both exclaimed, "No way are we getting involved with them." It was obviously them. They were enormous, very tall, 6'6" at least. Mean-looking, battle-worn, scarred faces, and in their mid-20s. I have never seen meaner-looking guys in my life. We kept a low profile and decided not to meet them. They left the railway station and we watched them head into town. Shortly afterwards, my mobile phone rang and, you've guessed, it was one of them. He asked where we had got to and why had we not met them. I stumbled over my words for a moment, made a pathetic excuse and told him I was on my way to their location and to give me a minute or so and we could have a coffee with them. He agreed and we plucked up courage, and with great trepidation we made our way to their location. We never got to have a coffee, as they were very eager to get on. They stuck out like sore thumbs amongst the average shopper, so it was easy to find them. I am 5'7" tall and not easily frightened, but something about those two gave me the creeps. My friend never spoke throughout the introductions and they almost completely ignored him. In fact, I got the impression they weren't happy to see him. They gave me their first names, but I have completely forgotten them. One of them appeared to be more senior. He also appeared to be very dangerous. The other, slightly smaller guy, seemed kinder and at first, hardly spoke and listened intently to what his partner was asking me and to my replies. They had no transport and asked me to take them to the areas where I had had contact with aliens and UFOs. I told them that I had a car, and if they followed me we could get in the car and make our way to the areas in question. Strange as it may seem, they both appeared a little worried at this, and for the first time since meeting them I felt more relaxed and in control. We all got in the car and made our way to the first destination. They, in turn, bombarded me with questions. Some related to my abduction and sightings experiences, but others about me personally, and what my feelings were about the UK and my opinions as to what the aliens and UFOs wanted. Also, why I thought the aliens were visiting Earth. They took notes continuously and also recorded our conversations on pocket recorders. It must be said that in their own way they were quite friendly and courteous. But you could see that, under the surface, they were dangerous individuals. I was also convinced that they were carrying firearms. I cannot explain why I thought they were armed, it was just a feeling. On reaching the first location, they took charge, asking me to stand near to the area of the sighting, whilst they took photographs of me near to the site. They were very thorough and never dropped their guard for a moment. They took a great deal of photographs. They also seemed very interested and at the same time a little bewildered. It was as if they were as baffled by the UFO phenomenon as I was. I also had the impression that they were lost. I know it sounds daft, but it was similar to a child who had got separated from a parent in a shopping precinct, utter bewilderment and loss. I started to become more confident, and felt that perhaps it was because it was my car we were traveling in. I had some form of control over the situation. I genuinely sensed that they were both unhappy with this. We visited most of the locations in question and spent a number of hours together. I was almost hoarse with answering their questions, but felt I had to. On returning to Wigan Town Centre, they thanked me and told me to be careful. Then the taller guy said, "Thanks. It's been very interesting and we are quite happy with you. There's no problem, you won't hear from us again." I thought to myself, what a strange thing to say, What do they mean, happy with you? Anyway, I said, okay, it's a pleasure. If you really need to see me again, please feel free to call me. He then said, there's no need, we've got all the information we require, we'll catch our train now. It was then that I had the bright idea to offer them a lift back to their university. Their mood altered and they became very edgy and nervous. But I insisted. They very reluctantly agreed and told me to head north on the M6. We got in the car and I deliberately drove like a demon. I felt that I was now in control. And, in the rear-view mirror as we traveled at high speed up the M6 motorway, I could see that they were very nervous. If it was because they were trapped in my car, I will never know, but they weren't happy. As we approached the Preston link, one of them exclaimed that they could drop them off in Preston as they had just remembered a meeting they had arranged there. I reluctantly agreed, pulled up near Preston city center, shook their very powerful hands, and that was that. I have never heard from them or seen them since. Later, summing up the meeting, I felt that they were just two guys doing a job and for some strange reason I felt sorry for them. I also rang a number of universities, but no one had heard of them.
I'm from Tuscany in Italy. About 3 years ago, two strange people rang my door and then vanished into thin air before my eyes. Possible meeting. I want to try to put as much detail as possible. Since I am Italian, if I express myself in a somewhat strange way, it is because I do not speak English perfectly. So, since I was little, I have always been literally obsessed with everything related to UFOs, aliens, mysterious creatures. It was summer and I was in my room. I was fooling around on the computer at about 15:00 hours in the afternoon. At one point, my doorbell rings. I live on the second floor of a large house, and therefore people who want to enter must first ring the bell of the gate, so that I then give them the opportunity to enter by opening the aforementioned gate. One of the windows of my house overlooks the place where the doorbell resides, and usually, when I heard someone ringing, I always went to check who was from the window to know in advance if I would open it or not. I don't like to open to strangers, so after hearing the sound, as usual, I go to the window to observe who had played, and that's when I see them. I see two men, one old and one young, both dressed as 1960s gangsters. The old man was very tall, black suit with white undershirt, and had gray hair and the typical hat of those times, and carried a small suitcase. The other man was much younger, had straight black hair, small round glasses, white shirt, and suspenders. The old man had an eerie smile on his face, and they were looking in the direction of my door, as if they were waiting for me to open. For a few fractions of a second I watched them, thinking, WTF? And this is where a very disturbing thing happens. As I was watching them, the old man jerks his head and literally looks at my window, catching my gaze. This made me so uncomfortable that I instinctively bent down under the window. I don't know why, he just looked at me. The fact is, he couldn't see me. I try to explain myself as best I can. The aforementioned window is oblique to the area where the bell is located. Okay. Plus the roller shutter was down and I was half hidden by the window curtain. But I can assure you that he looked me full in the face, as if you know I'm there. I was down for a few seconds, and taken by extreme curiosity, I got up to check what they were doing. But they disappeared. So I literally ran to the front door and went out. They're gone. I go down the stairs and out the gate. My house is located on a private street that ends in a short dead end. It was literally impossible that they had disappeared at that speed. They could not have had the material time to get into a car, for example, and leave or walk away. Before leaving the avenue of my house, I would have seen them anyway because I got off right away. It's not like I waited for minutes. I literally went downstairs to look for them after a maximum of several seconds, and from the window to the door of my house it took me maybe 4 minutes 5 seconds maximum, yet they were gone. In order not to sound crazy, I picked up the phone and immediately sent an audio to my friend's Telegram group telling them what had happened, in order to be sure of what I had experienced. We still talk about that day and I still can't figure out what happened. I also immediately thought of Jehovah's Witnesses because of the way they were dressed. The problem remains the fact of their disappearance. Okay, they could have entered one of the houses, but it is not that simple for these reasons. The house below me is inhabited by two elderly people. Usually in the summer during the afternoon they sleep, or if they are awake. Before answering the doorbell, it takes a lot of time because they are very slow. Plus they scream a lot because they are a bit deaf and scream while they talk. In fact, I stayed in, so when they have guests in the house I can hear almost everything. I remained silent to hear if someone had entered their house, but nothing. The other neighbors have the house in front of mine. But to reach it you have to cross the road. So I would have seen them, and if they had gone away by car there I would have seen, because as I said, it is a road that does not go anywhere. The fact that they had disappeared filled me with such curiosity that without even realizing it I rushed out. Actually thinking about it, if I had found them outside I would not know what I would have told them. As soon as they disappeared I went out looking for them. I don't know where I found the strength.
I've always been pretty skeptical of things, but I do believe that men in black, if you will, are real in the way they have been depicted. When I was a kid we lived on a country farm in the Midwest, very secluded. We had been seeing lights in the sky for a long time. But one night, in particular, they were so active that they finally started to worry my parents. My mom called the nearest Air Force base, one of the largest and most well-known in the country. She told them what was going on and that there were literally hundreds of craft swarming the sky. They immediately sent a fleet of freaking fighter jets to the airspace around our house. As soon as they arrived all of the craft cloaked or whatever to where we could barely see them. The jets turned around and left in a hurry, so my mom called the base back asking why they left. They told her that as soon as they got there all of their equipment had totally stopped working and they lost communications. Their navigation instruments and everything. But they assured her they'd be back to investigate. They sent choppers after that and patrolled the skies all night and morning but found nothing more that they told us about. That next evening though, 4 men in all black dress suits came to our house. We were all in the living room when my mom greeted them at the door and invited them in. They immediately asked to speak to her alone and she sent us to our rooms to talk to them. They were, like I said, in all black and wearing hats and sunglasses, even though it was later in the evening and dark, which I thought was weird. They were all very pale, as well, all the same skin tone. It looked like their heads were bald under the hats. I didn't see any hair at all. I mean, they all looked pretty much identical from what I could tell. My mom just told us that she went over what happened the previous night a few times and they were persistent about asking if she was forgetting anything and asked a couple times if there had been any abnormal occurrences leading up to the night in question, even if they seem unrelated. My mom, knowing that quite a lot of odd things go on in the wilderness surrounding our farm, just played dumb because something in her gut told her not to drag this out or let them know too much. They told her not to mention anything from the past 48 hours to anyone until they figure out what is taking place in the area. They said they're sure it's harmless but wouldn't want to cause a panic, it's a small rural area and word gets around quickly. So they left and that's pretty much it. We got a call a few days later from someone at the base saying that they weren't sure what caused the events of that night but said it was probably just an anomalous weather pattern or something. It wasn't the weather, it was much more akin to a damn invasion.
After hearing story after story of strange encounters with strange men dressed in black suits, I wanted to tell a story from my childhood that to this day I have been unable to explain. This took place in 2001 when I was 8 years old. It was summer and I was on a field trip with my town's community center daycare program. We were at the New York State Museum in Albany, New York. I was in a group with maybe 2 or 3 other kids and one of the daycare workers for a chaperone. We got there in the morning and were told we could roam around the museum with our group until either 12 or 1 when we had to meet back up with everyone for lunch on the 3rd floor. Our group walked around, looking at all the exhibits, and after a while, we realized we had lost track of time. We only had a few minutes to get up to the 3rd floor for lunch and attendance, and we were on the other side of the museum from where the elevators are. We hurried quickly to the lobby and hopped into an elevator. Out of breath from the near sprint we had done to the lobby, our group piled into the elevator. We hit the 3rd floor button, and my chaperone said we had made it in time and that we still had a minute or so to spare. Then, as the doors were closing, an extremely well-dressed man walked into the elevator. He was wearing black shoes, a black suit with a white dress shirt, black tie, black leather gloves, and a black fedora, and was carrying a black leather briefcase. At the time I thought nothing of it, but I've always looked back at this and thought this was very odd as it was summer and he was dressed for the dead of winter. As the man got on, I noticed that he kept his head down, almost as though he didn't want us to see his face. He quickly turned around, only then lifting his head. He just stood there with his back to us, and I don't remember ever seeing him select a floor. the elevator doors closed and this eerie feeling seemed to be emanating from the man in black. We had left the lobby on the first floor and were going up the third floor, so the ride should have been maybe 10 or 20 seconds at most. The elevator's display showed we had arrived at the third floor, but the elevator didn't stop. The numbers just kept climbing, and we were definitely still moving. I want to preface this by saying those elevators in the lobby only have access to 4 floors, and to my knowledge the museum only has 4 above-ground floors. I'll talk more about that at the end. At this point, it had been well over a minute since the elevator started moving and the numbers on the display continued to climb, as did the elevator. That eerie feeling that had been seemingly emanating from this man was getting more intense and the air in the elevator was beginning to get extremely heavy. This seemed to get more and more noticeable as we continued to go up. The higher the elevator climbed, the feeling turned from eerie to foreboding. I remember getting the feeling you get in the pit of your stomach when you know something bad is going to happen. Something definitely wasn't right. The display was saying we had passed the 50th floor and we were still climbing. At this point it had been around 5 minutes in the elevator. The atmosphere in the elevator had gotten almost unbearable. This heavy, ominous feeling was something I've never experienced since. The closest thing I can compare it to is that feeling you get when you walk down a dark hallway after watching a horror movie, and even that doesn't begin to describe this. Suddenly, the elevator stops. There's a sudden shift in the atmosphere of the elevator. It went from this foreboding feeling to a feeling of impending doom. Then I remember almost panicking when I thought about being on the other side of those doors. I was telling myself over and over again that the buttons on the elevator don't go past the 4th floor, so there aren't any floors beyond that, so whatever is on the other side of those doors can't possibly exist. This whole experience can't possibly have happened, and when the doors open I'll see all my friends from the other groups eating lunch and everything will be okay. But that's not what happened. And this is where things have always gotten fuzzy for me. I remember getting on the elevator with my group, the man walking in, and the elevator going up. But I can't remember my group being in the elevator after a certain point. I know it was at least 5 minutes from the time we entered the elevator before it stopped, and yet I can't tell you how much time passed between when the elevator stopped and when the doors opened. I can remember looking at the display to see what floor we were on, but can't remember what it said. I remember being frozen there, with no sound or movement whatsoever. I remember feeling like if those doors opened, something bad was going to happen, to the point where I remember panicking inside my head, pretending that none of this wasn't happening. But every time I opened my eyes, that sinister man was still standing there, as still as a statue. And then all of a sudden, the man who was responsible for all of this, who had not moved a single muscle since the elevator doors closed, drops his briefcase. Not even a second after the briefcase hit the ground, the doors of the elevator opened. And yet I can't remember what was beyond those doors. I have tried for the last 18 years to remember and have never been able to see it. I just remember it being white and bright. The man then calmly picked up his briefcase, tipped his fedora, almost as if to bid us goodbye, and walked off the elevator. I then remember the doors closing and that ominous feeling being gone, and in an instant we were on the 3rd floor and the doors popped open. Only then do I remember seeing the rest of my group on the elevator. All of them looked as terrified as I did, especially our chaperone. Looking out, I saw the rest of the kids and chaperones from the other groups. We walked out of the elevator, and had been expecting to be extremely late for lunch, but we had made it on time. Which is impossible, because we had initially made it to the elevator a minute or so before lunch started, and that encounter on the elevator had lasted at least 5 or 10 minutes. I remember our chaperone pulling the other adults aside and I assume told them what had happened to us on that elevator. I remember sitting at the table with my friends eating a Lunchable pizza and the kids from my group and I sharing the story of what had just happened, no one believing us. I remember the chaperone I had avoided the subject for the rest of the day, and the other kids in my group seemed to have dropped it as well. I remember that I told my mom what had happened and I've always felt as though she didn't believe me. But before writing this, I wanted to make sure that really did happen since I was so young and it had been well over a decade since this happened, and that it wasn't something my mind made up over the years or maybe just a very vivid dream. So I asked my mom if she remembered me telling her about this, and she said she did. She remembers picking me up from the community center, and the second we got into the car I had told her all about the man in black and the elevator going up all these floors, and even that he had dropped his briefcase. She said she also remembers me telling her that he had said something to me, though she doesn't remember what, and I don't have any memory of him saying anything. So here is my story. 18 years later, I still have absolutely no clue who that man was, where the elevator took us, what was beyond the doors where the man walked off, or anything that happened in that elevator. I just know that it happened. I have no idea how long we were in that elevator. It could have been minutes or even hours, but what I do know is that time seems to have been separate from our reality, since no time had actually passed when we got to the 3rd floor. Hopefully you have heard something similar, or at least have an idea what happened. I've gone through every explanation I can think of and none of them make sense. From not remembering correctly what elevator we got on, and perhaps getting in one somewhere else, but that's impossible for reasons I've listed in the paragraph below this. I thought maybe it was a really vivid dream, but my mom remembers me telling her right after picking me up from daycare, the day of the field trip. I've even considered a gas leak in the elevator causing us to hallucinate. The one thought that's always been in the back of my mind has been that we got onto the elevator and took a ride through another dimension. Just a little side note, I had a job with a catering company in the Albany area last summer, and one of the most common venues we catered at was the New York State Museum. Over that summer, I rode probably every public elevator in that building, and even a cargo elevator they have, and not a single one I rode on had any buttons beyond the 4th floor. In the year 1999, my father was a taxi driver in North Dakota. In case you don't know, 1999 was a scary year, Y2K, for hippies like my father. He and many others thought that the computers would reset everything to the year 1900 instead of 2000, and we would have to restart with old technology. He was preparing for the worst the whole year, and my mother told him to stop because it was a stupid idea, but he wouldn't listen to her. He always thought the government was after him and watching him, which made him even more paranoid. He told me that in December of 1999 he thought he started seeing a stalker. A man who wore a black suit, a black tie, and a dark brown fedora. It was always at 8 a.m. when he started work, so he blew it off for a while and thought maybe he was just on his way to work as well. That is, until he hailed my dad's taxi. It was less than a week before New Year's and the man hailed his cab. My dad said he walked slower than a normal person did and had no facial features, as in no scars, blemishes, or discoloration in his face. He was about 5'10" and had a highish pitched voice. He also had a briefcase handcuffed to his hand. He got in the back seat on the driver's side and said, 292nd Avenue, floor it, and handed him $500. My dad said it would have not even been close to a $500 drive and insisted not to take all $500. The man said, "You will need it soon, Patrick," as calmly as a human being could talk. My dad said he was flipping his shit at how he knew his name and how crazy the situation was. My dad tried to make small talk on the way there, but the man just looked straight ahead at the road and never said a word. He arrived at the road to find it was in the middle of absolutely nowhere. My dad kept driving until the man whispered, "Stop." The man said nothing as he slowly got out and started walking into the field. My dad looked at the man to see his briefcase handcuffed to his left hand, and a revolver in his right. My dad peeled out and kept looking to make sure the man never tried to shoot him, but he didn't. The man never stopped walking, looked, or changed his pace. Nobody believed my dad when he told them and tried to forget it. New Year's 2000 came and he never needed the money. The world didn't end, and he had a lot of canned food for nothing. He forgot until this year, when we were going to see a ghost town this summer on our way back from vacation. Google said to take the very same road he took the man on, and he told me to stop the car. I did as he asked and pulled over. He told me this story and demanded we drive away and never go anywhere near there again. The man was never seen again by my father, and I have no idea of this man's intentions. This is such a bizarre incident I'm about to describe to you. I can't be certain, but this most likely occurred in the summer of 1992, which would have been the summer before my senior year in high school. I was hanging out in the driveway at my best friend's house on North Greenfield Avenue in Waukesha, Wisconsin. It was about 4 p.m. I had parked my 1980 Chevy Malibu on the curb in front of his house. As my best friend and I were standing in the driveway, a brand new black Lincoln Town car with tinted windows pulled up behind my car, blocking the driveway. As soon as it stopped, 3 men, including the driver, got out of the car. They walked up to the sidewalk and faced us. They were all wearing black suits and dark tinted sunglasses, all of them normal build and physically fit. The strangest part about the incident was that the one man immediately addressed me, as if he knew the Malibu was my car. "I will give you $2,000 cash for your car." He was, as far as I can remember, totally expressionless, as were the others. As I understood, he would hand me cash and drive the car away immediately. It didn't seem like a transfer of the title was an issue. Still kind of confused by the offer, the only thing that I managed to say was, "It's not mine to sell, my dad owns it," which was true. That was it. They made no more attempts to make a deal. They turned around without a word, got into their car and drove away. They didn't stop at any other houses as far as we could see. At the time I knew nothing of Men in Black incidents, nor did my friend. We both stood there confused, and after talking about what had happened, we came to the conclusion that $2,000 would have been a great deal for me, but not worth the possible hassle that may have followed. Strangely enough, my dad sold the car a few weeks later. I think he got less than $500 for it. My friend can back up my claim. I haven't seen him for almost 5 years, but it was such an odd event we reminisced on it a few times after it happened. I always wondered if other so-called Men in Black had ever approached people and offered to buy their cars or any other property.
I hope that you enjoyed tonight's broadcast. If you enjoyed tonight's story, then please subscribe to the channel, as more green texts will appear daily. A new broadcast will appear when the clock strikes midnight Central Time.
Remember to check out the Odyssey page in the description for a second archive of the channel's videos.